But then when I declared bankruptcy, it was like a final concession of defeat. Like, all right, not only did I fail as an entrepreneur, but I failed spectacularly. And I think I needed to come to terms with how I perceived myself. And for a 3-year period, I think how I came to terms with that was thinking, okay, this is going to be the period where I just try and quietly improve myself. I'm going to try and do as well as I can in my career. I'm going to exercise regularly. I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to become good with money.
Welcome to the Get Rich Slow Club. I'm Anna, and I'm here today with Thomas.
Anna, it is a pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much. Before we get started, and this is an episode you don't want to miss because we are talking about bankruptcy, something that doesn't get discussed enough on this podcast. Before we do though, what is your money win or loss of the week?
Okay, I have a major money win this week. This morning, I bought a bulgogi beef sandwich, and unbeknownst to me, it was the discounted item on the menu. I expected to pay $16, but I got a $2 discount. So
win.
Every cent counts. I'm going to count it as a win.
That's a good one. And
how about you?
I love food wins. Mine is that I just got approved for debt recycling.
Hey.
Yeah, this is something that we've talked on the show for a really long time, and we'll do an episode on it, but I'm very excited that I'm officially approved for debt recycling, and we'll dive deep into what that means and what that looks like in a future episode.
Lovely. Congratulations.
Thanks. So Thomas, this is a topic that obviously doesn't get discussed enough about. And to be honest, I've known you for many years now. We've worked together at Perler, and it has never come up in conversation. It's only by fluke that when we were talking about this podcast that you're like, well, I can talk about my bankruptcy story. And I said, whoa, I didn't even know that. So what does it mean to be bankrupt in Australia?
So in Australia specifically, being bankrupt, it means a few different things. Firstly, it's normally triggered when you're unable to pay certain debts. And what will happen is either your debtor pushes you into bankruptcy in an attempt to try and recoup their money, or you, as the person who owes money, says, look, I can't pay these debts. I'm going to file for bankruptcy, which will create a structured environment in which I can wipe the debts. After that, you're then bankrupt 3 years. During that period of time, you can't own property. You can't own a car over a certain value. That value constantly changes. You can't own shares or ETFs or any other kind of investment. So when you declare bankruptcy, you essentially need to submit those things to your bankruptcy trustee. If you earn over a certain salary, for me, it was like net $59,000, then you need to pay a percentage of your salary to your trustee. And the idea is that any kind of money that your trustee recoups is then redistributed to your creditors. For 3 years, you can't travel overseas, so you need to submit your passport. And everything you do is watched pretty closely. So my close friends knew that I was bankrupt, but beyond that, it wasn't something that I shared with my colleagues or with acquaintances because it has a certain stigma around it. And I've been free of bankruptcy for over a year now. So I kind of feel like I'm at a point where I can objectively reflect on it. It's kind of like an embarrassing story you have where you think, enough time has passed, I can laugh about that now.
That's something that you often hear in the financial industry, right? You hear people who tell their story and they're like, oh, I was in a lot of debt and I didn't want to tell that story, but now that I'm out of it, I can actually share that because it feels as though you've ticked something off the to-do list or you're in a better financial situation. So let's go back and hear your story of how you got to bankruptcy.
Okay, so I guess it began a little over 9 years ago. My now spouse and I had opened a cat cafe in Sydney, and it was the first dedicated cat cafe. It had been open for a little more than a year. It was doing very well. And we had brought on board a general manager who was running the day-to-day operations, and he was doing an incredible job. And I suppose like a lot of men in their 20s, I had this idea that opening a bar would be a very sensible thing to do. And I talked to my friends about it. My friends, also being men in their 20s, thought, that's a great idea. You smashed it out of the park with this cat cafe. There's no reason to think you wouldn't with a bar as well. And I thought, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, surely the unit economics are pretty much interchangeable. What could go wrong? They really weren't interchangeable.
Yeah, I think hospitality has one of the biggest failure rates when it comes to running a business.
Yes, as I discovered in short order. So I raised some investment from some friends. They chipped in some money. I borrowed some money to get it off the ground. We opened a bar in 2017 and we brought a lot of people through the door, but there were just so many things that I'd overlooked. I think firstly, because of the positive experience with the cat cafe, I had just assumed that everything would run according to plan.
And a cat cafe is so niche, right? Like it is
Exactly.
this absolutely niche where
Very much
in
so.
Australia, a bar is literally on every corner.
Exactly.
Yeah, very different.
There's also the fact that with a cat cafe, the way that it works is that people will book in to spend an hour with the cats and they'll receive a coffee or a hot beverage of their choice. So what it means is that we have guaranteed income ahead of time. Whereas with a bar or a restaurant, you're pretty much at the mercy of whoever walks through of an evening. You might have some bookings, but it's very rare to know what next week's fortunes are going to hold for you. There's also the fact that there's so many different products to sell and so many different pricing units to measure. And there were just things that I didn't really understand and I assumed I'd be able to work out. I guess I entered with a lot of privilege and I entered with the beginner's luck of having launched a very niche business, as you say.
Yeah.
So because we kept bringing lots of people through the doors, I just thought I'll borrow more money because we see that we're maintaining a high customer base. So surely I'll pay it off. But then after something like 6 months, we reached a point where it became apparent that the debts were no longer sustainable and we had to abruptly close our doors because if we didn't, we'd be trading while insolvent. Now, I don't want to delve into the technicalities around that. I'm not an accountant or a financial advisor, but depending on who you speak to, trading while insolvent, i.e. trading whilst you are unable to sustain your debts, is illegal or at the very least poses really serious legal problems. So as soon as we closed the bar, a lot of these debts transferred to me as the managing director of the business. And I kind of ducked and weaved for a few years and then COVID hit and they stopped chasing me up. And after COVID, I thought, oh, this is great. I'm in the clear now. Everyone's forgotten about me. But they hadn't. And so in 2021, my only real option to escape these debts was to declare bankruptcy. I was in a fortunate position where I didn't own any property at that point. I hadn't started working at Perla, so I had no idea what an ETF even was. So I hadn't been investing in shares. So it was really just a decision of, do I want these debts haunting me or do I want a clean slate?
So how does that work when you own a business? They go after you as the director of that business. Is that kind of how it's done?
Generally speaking, what will happen, to my understanding, is if you're a managing director and the business has debts, if the business fails, the debtors will try and come after you. In many cases, if the company is dissolved, then the managing director will be clear. My genius IQ move was personally securing these business debts.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Talk to a financial advisor. Here's the big disclaimer.
That's
Yes.
right. But I guess it was like those situations where you really want to buy a property and it's really expensive and it's not perfect, but you talk yourself into buying it. Like, oh, this kitchen's a real fixer-upper. I'm going to have so much fun renovating it.
It's like the sunk cost fallacy,
Exactly
right? You put money in and you're like, because I've already put money in, I'm going to just put more money in because I'm already believing. I'm doubling down on it. And in a lot of cases, you might double down on debt or double down on an investment that might not be actually ideal for you.
Exactly. It's like thinking, I'm going to dig myself out of this pit by digging deeper. No, dig up, stupid. So that's kind of what happened. And it was almost like being an addict in some ways where I just told myself what I wanted to hear to justify the decision. And so, of course, what it meant when the business closed is that all of these creditors, they had the legal right to pursue me as the managing director because I put my signature to it. So in 2021, I submitted my passport. I acknowledged I wouldn't go overseas for 3 years. I attached myself to a trustee. I filled out an encyclopedia's worth of paperwork and I officially became a bankrupt.
So you claimed bankruptcy yourself.
Yes, I did.
And at the same time, what happened to the cat cafe? Was that also closed?
Mercifully, I had sold my shares in the cat cafe before I needed to declare bankruptcy.
Right, okay.
So as of this recording, the cat cafe is still open and running. The general manager who had run it during my time. He's still running it. He's doing an amazing job. So the Cat Cafe was left unscathed from my stupid decisions, for which I'm really, really grateful.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's great that that legacy still exists.
Yeah.
So then you had to claim bankruptcy.
Yes.
And what is it like at that time? Because surely there's listeners here who may be in a very similar situation, and they're like, we'd love to hear from your experience so that they can take on some of the learnings that you've come across. What do you do then at that point?
I guess there was an emotional and a practical element. The emotional element to me was that for a period of time, I'd seen myself as quite a savvy entrepreneur. And then when that bar went out of business, that perception took a hit. But then when I declared bankruptcy, it was like a final concession of defeat. Like, all right, not only did I fail as an entrepreneur, but I failed spectacularly. And I think I needed to come to terms with how I perceived myself. And for a 3-year period, I think how I came to terms with that was thinking, okay, this is going to be the period where I just try and quietly improve myself. I'm going to try and do as well as I can in my career. I'm going to exercise regularly. I'm going to write a book. You've written to yourself, so you know that's something that doesn't happen overnight. It requires consistency. And I'm going to become good with money, which I'll talk about in a little while. But then I suppose the logistical aspect was that I needed to suddenly acknowledge that everything I was doing was going to be monitored by a trustee. The way that worked is that the government assigned me a trustee, which was like this large conglomerate that attends to an array of financial issues. I was like the tiny end of their spectrum. But I would need to provide bank statements to them, pay slips. If I received a promotion, I would need to inform them. I would need to keep on top of my net salary to ensure that I was paying them the relevant percentage so that they could in turn distribute it to my creditors. And I would need to be mindful of little things like if I transferred money to my spouse. You know, when you're married or you're in a relationship, you transfer money back and forth all the time, right? But I needed to ensure that I could justify whatever it was for. Because, for instance, if my trustee thought that maybe I was trying to funnel money to my spouse so that she could, I don't know, invest shares on my behalf or something, then I could find myself in really dire straits. So
basically it's micromanaging your money, right?
So,
like making sure. Can you share how much debt you were in?
So it was probably, in total, it was probably around $200,000, that ballpark, by the time I declared bankruptcy. And part of that reason was because they hit you with crippling interest rates. And it had just been accruing interest for years by this point.
And it seems as though you were just pushing it under the carpet for a short time there.
Exactly. Yeah. It was one of those ironic things where when the bar went out of business, the amount was frustrating, but it wasn't debilitating. But at that point, I had no source of revenue.
Yeah.
And then I got a job, then I got a promotion, then I got another promotion. But whilst I kept earning more money, the interest rates kept accruing faster than my salary did. So it always felt like I was 2 steps behind.
Yeah. And often that's the feeling with debt. You always feel like you're playing catch up, and it's really hard to get ahead when interest is actually against you.
Yes.
When you're investing, interest is on your side, but when you're in debt, it's the same thing. It's compounding, but in the opposite direction.
Yes, absolutely right. So I became very mindful of that, I think, when I declared bankruptcy. Until that point, I think it probably just covered my ears. I just thought, don't want to know about it. This debt is accruing somewhere. I'm just hoping that if I bury my head in the sand, it will magically disappear, or that I can outlast these creditors, that maybe if I'm stubborn enough, they'll get sick of chasing me. So case in point, I had this one particular creditor who sent a notary to my workplace to try and serve me with documents that would require me to go to court. But the only way that works is if they can serve it to you in person. So miraculously, the day that happened was a work from home day for me. So the office manager had said, "Oh, Thomas, some person came to the office looking for you. Do you know what that was about? And I said, oh, that's strange. Must have just been delivering me a package or something. I knew exactly what it was about. So for the next 3 months, every time I went to work, I would need to use the freight loading dock to enter the office in case this person caught me on the way in or out.
Oh my God, what a way to live. It is absolutely terrifying, right? Because you're in a dire kind of space where you're trying to pay this off. You're trying to do the right thing, but also you are now getting hounded.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how are you feeling? Like I would just assume that I would have chronic anxiety if I was in this situation.
I think I kind of alternated between anxiety and a dogged determination that I wasn't going to give in. And the latter kind of manifested as a sort of delusion. Like I would just think, nope, it's fine. I'm going to outlast them. They'll eventually forget about it. And then I can get on with my life, which is of course not how debt works. But I think it was probably my coping mechanism. Because on other days, if I thought about it too much, I'd find myself spiraling down this rabbit hole of worry. And I think maybe the silver lining to declaring bankruptcy for me is that I was able to think, okay, I no longer have this worry hanging over my head. There are all kinds of micromanagements that I need to contend with now, but at the very least, I know what I'm up against every day. And I think psychologically that gave me a clean slate. And at that point, I actually started budgeting for the first time in my entire life. And it was like a trial by fire that introduced me to a lot of the concepts you discuss on this podcast. And part of it was because I needed to, as I mentioned, pay money to my trustee. And so I thought, okay, what's the percentage of my take-home salary I need to save for them? Beyond that, what's the percentage that I can save to meet my ongoing necessities? And then I want to know that when this finishes, I'm not starting from square one. I'd like to be able to start saving some money so that my spouse and I can buy a home one day, so that I can invest in ETFs eventually, so that I can take an overseas trip. So what kind of money do I have at my disposal that can give me a sense of hope for the future? And so because of that, I actually started saving. And now I'm the kind of person where if I tap on for a train trip and it costs me $3, I will bring out my little budget in my phone and deduct $3 immediately. Like I am that fastidious about it.
So bankruptcy actually made you better with money.
Absolutely.
That's wild. But
Right?
I think that's what happens often when you're kind of in a dire situation where you're like, when you hit the point where it's sink or swim, you have to make that decision.
Yeah.
And you really chose to swim. For other people who are in a similar situation to you, what do you think are some of the big takeaways? Like, did you even have any support at this time? Like, what made you budget?
Okay, so I think the most important thing for me was that I was really privileged to have a very supportive spouse. She had backed me to the hilt through this entire process. And a lot of people would have just thought, you know what, you dug yourself into this mess, I'm not going to stick around for it. And they would have been well within their rights. It's not like this was something that was foisted upon me. I made a series of conscious decisions as an adult. Beyond that, I spoke to a financial counselor before I declared bankruptcy, and they were really, really useful. They didn't advise me in either direction. They just objectively laid out what life would look like as a bankrupt, and then laid out the alternative of what it would look like if I didn't declare bankruptcy. And I feel like that helped me to make an informed choice. And I think finally, this was more of a peace of mind aspect, but the Australian Financial Security Authority, they maintain a lot of resources on their website. So for the entire period that I was bankrupt, I kept this tab open on my phone, which was a tab that explained how to resolve complaints with your trustee. So any moment that I started thinking, what if my trustee doesn't want to release me from bankruptcy at the end? You know, what if they decide that there's some technicality I haven't met? What if they don't return my passport to me? What if? I could just think, it's okay. You have this tab open. If they make your life difficult, you can just call the number that the AFSA has provided and you have some kind of recourse. Now, in the end, I didn't need it at all, but just knowing that the resource existed, I think helped me fall to sleep on those nights when I would get inside my own head.
Yeah, it gave you some security to know that you are doing the right thing or you're going in the right direction,
yes.
right? Oh. So you mentioned that you talked to a financial counselor. This is a service that is actually free in Australia.
Yes.
What made you turn to a financial counselor?
I think I had conducted a lot of research online about the bankruptcy process, but I really didn't want to be one of those people who has a headache, goes on WebMD, and then decides that they have cancer. I didn't want to do the financial version of that. So when I started looking into options for how I could get a second opinion, so to speak, I looked at financial advisors and lawyers and accountants, but they were all costly. And I just thought, the whole issue here is that I want to declare bankruptcy, so I don't want to spend more money than I need to for that.
Yeah.
And so I think I discovered on some Reddit forums that financial counselors had helped people in the past and they didn't charge a fee. And I've since read The Barefoot Investor and I follow Scott Pape and he talks about financial counselors all the time. And I'm glad that he does because I feel like they're this fantastic resource that many people don't even know about.
Exactly. I met with a couple to do some money coaching with. So just like run their budget and help sort them out. And in the end, we sat down. I was like, a good opportunity for you would be to talk to a financial counselor. Because that's exactly that. There are certain people that potentially need help, especially if they have debt and it feels like they're drowning, and just getting a second opinion, having someone kind of lay that out for you is so valuable because that kind of made you decide what you wanted to do, whether you wanted to keep running or whether you wanted to deal with that debt. So how is it now on the other side? You've paid off that full amount. Is that right?
So I haven't paid off the full amount. What happens when you go into bankruptcy is that for that 3-year period, your trustee will take what they can within a really structured format. So as I said, if you have any assets, they'll take those. You earn over a certain threshold, they'll take their percentage. And then at the end of it, your debts are cleared. So it gives your creditors a 3-year period in which they can gain some kind of repayment.
Right.
And for the bankrupt, at the end of the 3 years, whether or not you've paid off the entirety of your debts, you're given a clean slate.
So that's when you get your passport back. Is that
Yes.
right? That's when you can purchase a home. That's when you can, all of these kind of red flags that were marked against your file is now lifted.
Exactly right. Yes. So my spouse and I, we now own a property, we invest in shares, we're able to do those things. I should mention, we don't own a property in my name because when people emerge from bankruptcy, there's a couple of years before their credit resets. So I just thought, I don't want the smoke of trying to apply for a mortgage and having that pop up. So we purchased the property in my spouse's name, but we were both able to financially contribute to it because I didn't have this debt hanging over my head. So there'd be no question of what I did with my own money. And we took a very belated honeymoon at the end of last year. We were gone for like 5.5 weeks because we had some catching up to do. And I still remember the day that I went to my trustee's office to pick up my passport. It was the final day of my bankruptcy. And I was walking there. I put my headphones on. I played Weapon of Choice by Fatboy Slim. I was strutting down the street, but at the same time, part of my brain was still expecting a trap door to open beneath my feet, or I'd arrive and they'd proffer my passport and then say, "Ha 3 more years of bankruptcy for you." And I didn't quite trust it until I had my passport in my hands and a notice of discharge from my trustee.
What a feeling.
It really was. It really, really was. And I felt like I could restart, certainly, but I also didn't feel like I just picked up where I'd left off 3 years earlier. I felt like I'd developed some coping mechanisms, both in terms of those budgeting skills, yes, but also in terms of the way that I respond to stress. And I think more than anything, I really felt a sense of gratitude because I was really aware, as I said, I had an incredibly supportive spouse. I'd had a supportive circle of friends and family around me. And I had just grown up in a supportive environment where I had the opportunity to rebuild. A lot of people in the world, they don't have that chance. They might take a shot, and if they miss, that is it, because they have no support structure around them. So I became, I think, really mindful of that. I think before that, I was probably conceptually aware that I was a lucky person, but I don't know if I practically felt it the way that I do today.
Support is so important. I know you've talked about your spouse multiple times in this episode. I often say that your biggest asset is the partner you choose in life and the people you surround yourself with, because they can uplift you, support you. You are now in a better place than you were before, with property, ETFs, investments under your belt, a better budgeting system, as opposed to potentially before where it felt like you were maybe drowning, right?
Absolutely.
Having that support is so crucial in this. For anyone who's kind of experiencing debt right now and they feel stuck, do you have any big tips that they can take away from this episode?
My first point of advice would be to speak to a financial counselor, because they can assess your situation and offer guidance much better than anyone on a podcast can. And they can then support you regardless of what you decide to do. So if you're in a situation like me, where you think these debts are enormous and I don't have any assets to my name at the moment, bankruptcy might make sense. They can advise you through that process. But if you do have assets, or if you work in a particular industry where bankruptcy might pose a problem, then they can help you negotiate with your creditors. They can buy you some time. They can offer all kinds of support mechanisms. And beyond that, I would probably just advise people to not feel like they need to keep it to themselves. So often I hear on social media people say, hey, if you're struggling, reach out to loved ones, reach out to friends. And I'm aware that's a privilege as well, because not everyone feels that they can do that. And not everyone is lucky enough to have people like that.
Yeah, for sure.
But if you do, then don't feel like you need to carry it on your own. There can be a real stigma, I know, around debt and around the idea of bankruptcy. And there can be this presumption that it's a very tangible and visible concession of defeat. But the problems aren't going to go away if you try and keep them to yourself. And if you talk to your people around you about what you're confronting, then you might find support. And you also might realize that they're just another obstacle that life will throw at you. And it doesn't make you less of a person. It doesn't mean that you're somehow falling behind according to some preconceived standard. It also doesn't mean that you need to start from scratch. You will emerge better from this process if you confront it. Whatever that looks like, whether that's declaring bankruptcy or working out a payment plan, it's not going to be a case where you need to rebuild your life when it seems like everyone around you is buying their sixth property. You'll develop skills and you'll develop an outlook that will really help you in whatever you do next.
Those are some amazing tips, Thomas. And I think that anyone who's kind of struggling right now, who are in debt, who think they have to claim bankruptcy, or who are in the process of doing it, you've given them some tangible tips. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much for joining us. If you found this episode helpful, please rate us 5 stars, write a review, or share with a friend. If you're new to investing, make sure to listen to our first 10 episodes. Follow us at Get Rich Slow Club or Tash at Tash Invests, or me at Anna Christina.
The Get Rich Slow Club podcast is a collaboration between Tash Etchman from Tash Invest and Anna Christina from Perla. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to investing. So make sure you check out our financial services guides and read the product disclosure statement and target market determination for any investments you're considering. See our show notes for more info. Any advice is general and does not consider your financial situation, needs, or objectives, so consider whether it's appropriate for you. This show was brought to you by Natasha Etchman, who is an authorized representative 1299881 of Guideway Financial Services, AFSL 420367, and Perla, who is an authorized representative 1281540 of Sanlam Private Wealth, AFSL 337927. The Get Rich Slow Club acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land we record on. From coast to coast, across land, waters, and communities, we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging.